Hello, welcome back to Sharks Happen. My name is Hal, I'm your host, going over shark attacks from the 1900s till present, mostly large sharks. It started over in Elliott Key at National Biscayne Park. The date is February 7th, 1982. Kim Seibel is 29 years old. He and a friend are out doing some diving. No word on what time or how far from shore. They're in 70 feet of water and Kim disappears. His partner is unable to find him, notifies authorities, and several searches are launched. All they recover of Kim is his fins, his mask, and his shredded bathing suit. They spoke to a Marine Patrol investigator who looked at the items, and he claims that, those teeth marks, he says that's classic Mako shark. He believes that he was taken by a Mako shark, and that's what the culprit was a Mako in this case. And they also talked to a Dr. Gordon Hubble over there, and he claims that it's a possibility it was done by a shark, which doesn't surprise me. This back in 1982, the Keys are the ones that throw in barracuda every time they have an attack prior to then. So they seem to be the worst as far as, trying to deflect, not giving information, don't know how much damage, the guy that was bitten in the hip that swam out at night to a sailboat and back, they didn't explain what kind of shark hit him. I'm still wondering whether that was a tiger or a white. I don't think it was a bull. But I think it was one of those other two, and they don't tell you. And, bitten in the hip like that, how did you not lose a tooth fragment in there? They're just not being honest, in my opinion. But, good news is I'm hoping to be able to relocate down there and look into these attacks when they happen. So that's our story of Kim Seibel. They never did recover anything of his. We're going to put this down as an attack and a predation. We're just not going to go with the Mako shark because I don't believe that you can really tell without, getting a tooth, getting a body, getting something, DNA, something to show you what shark it is. I understand that it could be a Mako. Similar attack to William Colbert, who is a marine biologist from Michigan here, and he went down and he ended up off of Key West. He ended up getting, I believe it was off of Key West. No, he was off of Isla Morada. He was over where we fish for yellowtail, right by the lighthouse. That's where he ended up getting taken. Alligator Reef, I think it is. So that's our story of Kim Seibel, an attack and a predation. Okay, now we're going to head over off of the Protea Banks. That's in South Africa, and the date is April 12th, 2017. Leopold Mairhuber is 68 years old, and he is out scuba diving. He's very, very experienced scuba diver. He's actually an instructor, 2,700 hours or something of instruction. He's out doing some diving in the early afternoon, and he's with a lot of people, and he doesn't surface with them when they have meeting points to make sure everybody's there. He's not there. They search themselves and contact authorities, and authorities launch search from helicopters, boats, and thorough searches carried out. And later in the day, that day it sounds like, they recovered remains. Fishermen ended up recovering the remains and turned them over to authorities. No word on what the actual damage is. It sounds like it was pretty severe, pretty brutal. Comes to mind is that Italian attack on Luciano Costanzo, but they don't tell you anything about what was done, what was recovered. All they say is that they're going to launch an investigation to determine the cause of death. And again, with these sharks, somehow finding people the day of that they drown. We can't find them, but the sharks find them every time. They don't mess with people unless you drown. I guess it's their whole model here. So it makes zero sense to me. You want me to save you some time and money? Here, sharks ate the guy. That's what happened. Unfortunately, we're putting this down as an attack and a predation. I don't need to wait for them to, waste their money and time and taxpayer money to be able to tell people what's obvious in this case. I mean, sharks are not out there finding people, drowning victims all the time. But if you go by some of these sites, they are. They can't figure out what happened. Well, let's see. He disappeared and you found remains. He drowned and then they ate him. Yeah, that's what happened. So that's our story of Leopold Mairhuber, an attack and a predation. We just don't know what kind of shark. Okay, now we're going to head over to a spot known as South Point, and that is in Kawarama Bay. That's Western Australia. The date is August 17th, 2010. Nicholas Edwards is 31 years old. He is out doing some surfing by himself. It's about 8:15 in the morning, and he's about 300 meters from shore, so about 330 yards out. And there's a gentleman on the beach named Mark Tomlinson, and he is watching what he says is white water out in the water, about 330 yards out, white water being kicked up where there's no waves. So he knows something's being attacked out in the water. Then shortly after that, Nicholas ends up swimming his way over to some nearby rocks, and rescuers meet him at the rocks and bring him up. His right leg, the thigh, was bitten, and the meat was avulsed, and it was pretty gnarly to the upper thigh. He also had bad lacerations to the leg. Don't know if it was a multiple bite or if the leg was bent like some cases are and it bites both at the same time. So don't have an idea there. It doesn't sound like it removed any tissue. As far as a feeding event, it sounds like, you know, these normal surfboard attacks are you know, just territorial. Want them out of the area, they get bit, and they end up leaving them alone after a short while. He just swims himself to the rocks, and he ends up passing away from his wounds. And you know, we just don't know. We're not sure this is a white shark. There's white sharks and bronze whalers all over in that area, I believe. I had read in the stories, so it's hard to say which one. I mean, I'm sure white sharks get blamed for some whaler attacks here and there. So, and other sharks. I mean, they lead the way, the white sharks, in attacks. But you know, it's kind of hard to say every time that somebody sees a shark and sees that it's a white, it is a white. So we're going to put this down as an attack, not an attempt to predate and a fatality. We just don't know what kind of shark. Okay, now we're going to head over to Three Stripes, which is a spot near Shane's Beach in Western Australia. The date is December 29th, 2014. Jay Muscat, he is 17 years old. He and a friend Matt, they're out doing some spearfishing. They're in about 70 feet of water. It's around noon, and a great white shows up, a 4 to 5 meter great white. So you're talking about, you know, 13 and a half to 16 and a half, 17 foot great white. It shows up and it goes immediately after Matt. And as it gets to Matt, Matt's able to push it away. And instead of the shark going after Matt further, it just goes on its way right over to Jay and bites him in the leg. Bites him in the leg, seems like a bite and release, and then it comes back after Matt. And Matt says it comes at him with his mouth open, that he stuck his spear gun in its mouth and pulled the trigger, and then the shark disappeared. While he was shooting the shark, the support boat came over and got Jay out of the water and then got Matt out of the water. Unfortunately, the shark bite to Matt's leg had severed the femoral artery and he had bled out. He ended up passing away from his wounds. Crazy attack, you know, two sharks coming at these guys, two passes at Matt. Luckily, he was able to push it away the first time, shoot it the second time. But it got that bite in on Jay. This is, you know, back in the start of the show, I might have put this down as this shark wanted to eat somebody, but not now. No, this is just get out of my water, territorial. Had nothing to do with wanting to eat either one of them. Unfortunate that Jay passed away, but the shark just didn't want him in their area. We're going to put this down as 2 attacks, 1 fatality, no attempts to predate. Okay, now we're going to head over to Glen Eden Beach, which is in Oregon. The date, April 21st, 1998. John Forse is 50 years old, and he is out doing some surfing. He shows up at the beach early in the morning, sees 3 or 4 people out about 150 yards from shore on their boards. So short time after he shows up, he paddles out, and they're all out there. He recognizes one of the men as, his last name is Weldon, friend of his, an acquaintance that he knows. So they all surf for about an hour from there. At this time, Weldon looks, and John Forse says he thought that he saw a dolphin breach and got really scared. All he knew was he looked frightened as could be. Shortly after that, Weldon had this fear that he had to get out of the water. So him and his companions got out of the water, but Forse is still out there. And now it's about 9:30-ish, and he's laying on his board and waiting on a wave. He says he saw something breach about 20 yards north of him about 5 minutes before the attack, and he's laying on his board when suddenly he feels a clamping pressure to his leg. Leg is clamped to the board, taken under the water. He's in 12 feet of water, so he's 160 yards from shore, 12 feet of water. Shark grabs him, pulls him under. He looks, shark still got him by the leg, and all he sees is gray. A lot of these large sharks, all you can see is the side of their body. And he says he starts wailing on this shark 3 or 4 times. It finally lets his leg go, and he floats to the surface. Now he's at the surface. Now he's right next to the shark, is right on him. I mean, it's up against him. You know, we hear about these shark and surfer sitting there right next to each other. So this happened to John Forse. He gets up there and he says that he could see the dorsal fin was within arm's reach of him. He says that he hit the spot in front of the dorsal fin, so he must have been punching down on the top of the shark, just to the spot in front of the dorsal. He said he hit it 3 or 4 times, and the shark finally sounded and started doing the dive spinny thing. But the problem now was that his leash was still attached, and I started dragging him with it. Dragged him a little ways, leash broke, and he floated back to the surface, looked over, saw his board about 10 to 20 yards from him. So he paddled over his board real quick, made his way into the shallows. When he got into the shallows, he actually stood up to test the leg. And he could stand on it. He knew he was okay, that he could stand on his leg and it was functioning. His friends met him there. They were gonna call the paramedics, but he was like, no, my leg is fine. I just need to get stitched up. Let's drive me in. So his friends took him and they started driving him in. They got pulled over, you know, for speeding. And when the police saw his leg, they told him, go on your way. So he gets in and he gets stitched up. He had 8, it sounds like individual teeth marks from like 2 inches wide, some of them 2.5 inches wide, 5 centimeters. So they're from 2 centimeters to 5 centimeters. They're about 1 inch to 2 inches wide, and they're separated when they're whites. You know, the separation between the teeth marks are there if the shark doesn't rake. So he had that. He got himself stitched up. Luckily, he didn't have any nerve or artery injuries, and it sounds like he was sewed up and good to go after that. They said this was the tooth fragment. I think they got a tooth fragment on this, and they said it was a 5-meter great white. So you're talking, 16, 17 foot great white. Had him by the leg, released him, let him go. We're going to put this down as an attack, not an attempt to predate, territorial attack, and that's our story of John Forse. Okay, now we're going to wrap up our unprovoked attacks over in Horsfield Bay, which is in New South Wales, Australia. The date is December 23rd, 1934. Roy Inman, he is 14 years old, and he is, I believe, on vacation. Him and his family are in a rental house, and there's a jetty just off of the house they're staying in. It goes a short distance out into the water, and 14-year-old Roy and his 12-year-old sister Joyce, they go out to the end of the jetty, and they start jumping into the water. They're going to go swimming. Their older sister Kathleen's going to go, but she's in the house. She's coming out in a few minutes. And Joyce goes ahead and dives in. Roy's clapping, telling her good job, but I bet I can jump in and dive in and cause less splashing. So Joyce is just a few feet from the jetty, and Roy dives in. It's 10 feet deep where they're diving into the water. And just as he's diving, the sister shows up at the door, and she's coming out, so she sees him dive in. Just as he dives in, the sister Joyce in the water with him sees a black fin, and she screams out and kicks out, and her leg is hit. And she felt a piercing pain, but she wasn't bitten. She was hit by the dorsal fin as it was going by her to go get Roy. So the sister at the door watched the water start boiling around Roy and him disappear. She went running down to the jetty. Her mother came out with her. So now the mother and older sister run down the jetty and get into a rowboat there and go right to the last place he was seen. And just before they got to the spot, Roy had surfaced again, but then the shark took him back under again. So the mom was sticking the oar in the water trying to find the shark or him. To no avail. A search was launched. Nothing was ever found of Roy. He ended up gone. He ended up, consumed, probably by a bull shark is what I'm thinking this thing is. The sister, luckily, all she had was an abrasive cut to her leg from being hit by the dorsal when it went by to go get Roy. And we'll put this down as one attack, one predation. Probably by a bull shark, but I'm not going to put it down. It could be, a different shark, but that, bull shark MO to do something like that. That's our story of Roy Inman, an attack, a predation. Okay, now we're going to finish off our show with What Were You Thinking? And You're an Idiot. And it's a slash here because they both go to the same attack. Before I get to that, I wanted to tell you my friends over in Australia, over by Cairns, up northeast of Cairns, so a little bit up there, you have this long, I think it's Middle Bay or something. But if you get the O-Search app and you open it up to your Australia, you can see, you always have that, I call them shark parties. We have them down our East Coast right now. They don't have the West Coast tagging going on, I don't think. And you guys have it all, you know, up and down your coast. There's only about 4 sharks there right now that are pinging on your coast. But one of them is in this Middle Bay, and it's right on the beach. So you got a 7.5-foot tiger shark sitting there swimming around, sharing the beaches over there off of Cairns. So if you go to beaches, I would always download this app just to see if there's a ping shark around. You know, to keep in mind when you're in the water. It's you know, it's not like it's out there trying to attack people. I'm sure people are in the water with it and nothing's happening. Unless you guys don't swim in that water. So that's our story of that. Another thing on a tiger shark, I'm going to post a clip in the video, a link to a video in the description of Emma, the tiger shark. I had some people ask me about Emma. I finally looked into her. I actually have, I think, a couple of photos of her that I was able to purchase. I think that some of these sites sell photos of her that some of these divers take. But she has a friend that this diver had taken out, as the time of the video, 4 hooks from her. And there was a break from 2020 to 2022 when they weren't allowed to see each other because of, you know, the pandemic. So he goes back in 2022, and you should watch this video and see this reunion of these two. It's just amazing. So that's my story on the 2 of those, and now we're going to finish off with What Were You Thinking / You're an Idiot. In July of 1935, over in Culebra, Panama. His name is Valentin Alonso, and he's 14 years old. He's out doing some fishing, but he's doing some odd kind of fishing. He's throwing dynamite in the water, blowing up, and then he's, I would think, collecting the fish from in the boat. No, Valentin jumps into the water, and he's collecting his fish, and of course something else that wants to collect these dead fish shows up, and it's probably a large shark. Bites his leg completely off, so he's got no leg. They get him in. He dies that night in Culebra, so he passes away from his wounds. We're going to put that down as an attack, not an attempt to predate. But what were you thinking, first of all? You're throwing dynamite into the water, and then you're going to jump into the water with all those fish and all the blood and all the stuff that you just kicked up? Not to mention the noise that is probably going to attract some of these sharks too. So you just called them in, but you're an idiot because you're killing everything down there, not just fish. I mean, anything that's in the area, you're concussing them, you're hurting their hearing, you're damaging all kinds of marine life so you can eat some fish? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So you, sir, are an idiot, and what were you thinking? And now we got an attack, and not an attempt to predate, but a fatality we got to put in the books because, you know, you decided to fish with dynamite instead of with a pole, or maybe even go spearfishing. I bet you have a better chance of not running into sharks spearfishing than you do with what you were doing. So that's our story for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you'll be back in a few more days for another show of attacks. But until then, if you go into that water, you are much more afraid of those sharks than they are of you.